starting. Okay, this meeting is being recorded. As I mentioned, please say if you do not want to be recorded. Meeting chat should be on. Okay, great. So these are the lightning talks for the Green Software Foundation Summit 2022. We'll be going through the lightning talks, and then once the lightning talks are complete, we will be wrapping up with myself and Carol kind of summarizing the day. It's really great to hear so many enthusiastic folks. Sorry, I'm just being pinged from the other chat. And this is the running order. So we've got Alicia, we've got Sed, Eva, myself, we've got Martin, Alessandro, Arne, Fergus, Alex, Geeta, and Joe. You will have 3 minutes to present. Feel free to share your own slides, take over control, or just talk. Just talking is also good. And then between each session, I will leave a 2-minute gap or up to 2 minutes for people to chat. That said, I think that is enough of me. I'm going to start. I'm going to spotlight you, and when you start, I will start the timer. Welcome to Alicia.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be here, and really excited to share the topic of a greener software development lifecycle. And when we talk to our clients about why a greener software development lifecycle is necessary, it raises a lot of questions for people to not think just from a personal point of view when we work in technology, but also a professional point of view. And so we start with framing the problem. So, today we understand that digital transformation is happening at an accelerated pace, but not just that we're bringing on board new digital services, but also the fact that these digital services are also advancing in the technology. As we know, distributed ledger technology, artificial intelligence, these type of technologies require different type of compute power and energy and efficiencies that we haven't experienced before, but they also support real business value, right? They're going to be key enablers in helping our clients realize their ambition. So when we talk about a greener software development lifecycle, we're really helping them understand what is your technology footprint going to look like based on your technology strategy, and how can we optimize that footprint in ways that are enabling you to not only digitally transform, but sustainably transform. And this is what we're calling the twin transformers. So the barriers that exist today at our clients when we approach them for enabling a greener SDLC is first awareness. Having an understanding of the impact of IT, because we haven't yet measured these, right? Also incorporate into the fact that there is a lack of awareness into the space. And also alongside the lack of awareness, there's a lack of tools and training. So how do we measure? Where should we measure? Understanding, is it at a network level? Is it at a device level? Is it at an application level? Where are we contributing the most from an emission point of view? And where can we prioritize our activities throughout the SDLC to maximize the impact we have in our sustainability efforts? And one of the things that we try and understand is all the way from the requirements phase. We know the software development lifecycle starts before even any code has been written. So here we understand also features that are asked for business aren't even utilized when they are in production. So having a bit of sobriety when we look at functional requirements and reflecting strongly what is the key business add is the first step that we look at implementing a greener software development lifecycle. And this is setting what we call sustainability by design.
You can continue if there are no questions, but yeah, I'm finding it really interesting, but you've got 1 minute 40 left.
Yeah, if there are questions, I'm happy to engage.
So are you implementing a green SDLC already? Have you already seen this in practice? And anyone else, feel free to come off mute as well.
Yes, I do, because of what I was talking about, sustainability by design. It's a framework we adopt at Accenture that starts with the outset of an IT program and project. There we set from an IT perspective, usually we have traditional dashboards on releases, how many stories, the length to production. But when we talk about sustainability by design, the dashboard objectives are much more different, right? So there we use, have we given sufficient training to the development team around this type of practice? Are we using measurement tools and appropriately taking action to them? So this is actually something we are doing today, and creating different type of incentives around IT projects. Yes, Fergus.
Just a general question, like if there are any tools that you're using today, like can you name them? What are they? Is there more we can learn about them?
Yes, we have our own proprietary tools at Accenture, of course. One that's just come to the market that we're talking about publicly is called EcoSonar, and this helps in your emission footprint of your application, but also web accessibility. So it's actually combining different factors. So if you look at the traditional Sonar Cube and the CI/CD pipeline, it's using things from Google Lighthouse, understanding web accessibility, but we've created a custom, basically developer toolkit to help you in the SDLC embed these principles.
Thank you very much, and cheers for sticking to time. I know it's always quite difficult. I find it quite hard. So right, now we're over to Said. Said, you sent me a video yesterday. Do you want me to play that still?
I think that's probably the best thing. You just play the video. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sid. I'll start you off with 1 minute 34 for questions.
Cool. There was one about the
I think we might have lost Sid.
I think I pressed the wrong button there.
There we go.
Am I back again now? Yeah, sorry about that. There's a lot of Teams meetings going on at the same time. It's a bit confusing. I think one was about the Sustainable Web Manifesto, wasn't it? So I can put in a link to that in the chat. It's just it's a sort of inspiring message and a sort of good thing to sign up to.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Sid? If not, I'll just highlight about the fact it says if the internet was a country, it'd be the 7th largest polluter. I think that's pretty cool / kind of scary. Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much, Sid. That was a great video, and I appreciate you doing it when you were ridden with COVID as well.
My pleasure.
Right, on to no green IT without mindset change.
That's me. Thank you, Chris. I'll try to share my presentation. It's only 4 slides, so I promise I'll fit in within the 3 minutes. Can you see my screen right now?
Yep, you're visible.
Okay, great. And very happy to be here today. And I'll talk to you about how there is no green IT without mindset change. I have a pleasure to work with clients on how to help them. It's a global IT services company, how to help them to engage employees on green IT journey. And to give you a bit of context, that specific company has a very ambitious objective to become carbon neutral by 2030. And in order to do this, they have developed a new strategy with green IT being a key component because it's the core of their activities and therefore the biggest impact for carbon footprint reduction. And who says new strategy says transitions and therefore need for cultural change and supportive stakeholders, which is what Talisha was also referring to before. So everything with awareness. And this is what we have the pleasure to work with them on at the moment. We have developed an awareness training program and helping them with the community setup. So we started with a series of interactive workshops on climate change and IT impact. We have chosen Climate Fresk format for this. For those of you who haven't heard about Climate Fresk, I would strongly encourage you to look it up. It's climatefresk.org. We have facilitated those workshops for the clients. They selected about 30 employees that are particularly interested in sustainability. But we also make sure that during the workshops, we adapted slightly the final part of it, which is around actions, to make sure that they leave the workshop with good understanding of fundamental science behind climate change, but also how they can act against it on individual level and as a company. Afterwards, we provided facilitator training to those participants, so they got a chance to become facilitators themselves. And they were also asked by our client to commit to organizing workshops internally on a regular basis. And we moved on to the last step, which is what we are working on right now, which is coaching, so supporting them during their first sessions to make sure they are comfortable, they have the right tools and so on. The result of this ongoing step is that we have this community getting really active, supporting each other, following up on progress, discussing different actions and so on and so forth, and also encouraging their colleagues to become facilitators in the future. And we will finish this soon, which will lead us to the end result that we have designed for ourselves together with the clients. And that's to help them to build this really strong network of in-house ambassadors that host regular workshops and therefore propagate sustainability ideas across the organization. I overheard this morning, they are talking about 2,000 people being participating in those workshops by end of the year. And we started with 30. So really good job. And I fit in within 3 minutes, according to my phone. Brilliant. So I'll stop sharing now.
You did really well, just right on the dot. Are there any questions?
Nope.
If not, I want to know a bit more about what Climate Fresk is, because I hadn't heard of it. I'm learning a lot.
You really should. It's a really great tool. We use it internally and we use it for clients, and I use it for friends. So just go ahead. Brilliant awareness tool.
Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll close there. And thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Right. So the next person in the running order is me. I'm going to paste this link in the chat and then get going. Feel free to time me to make sure it's totally fair. So my session was on myth busting. So I have 2 minutes 50 left. And I'd been running some internal workshops at Avanade around common myths that I'd seen around sustainability. And one of those was around where is the largest carbon impact in a typical business. Because from a lot of the businesses that we were looking at, we tend to find that the typical carbon impact is actually in the technology, unless you're a manufacturing, fast-moving consumer goods company or a number of others. Actually, you spend most of the day, as I said at the start, kind of in Teams, in Slack, in Skype, in WebEx. You're not actually wandering around physically moving bits and pieces around your business. The second one, and the timing's really quite hard, I'm going to pick where is the most software carbon generated in a website. And it varies. So I had front-end UI, back-end server. And I think when I was running this kind of myth-busting session, I actually kind of cheated with this one. It's actually, it kind of depends. Is it statically compiled? Is it bundled? Is there a lot of network traffic between the two? When I was looking at whether or not software is already efficient, exactly as Ed was saying, it isn't. Using Python is orders of magnitude more inefficient than using R, for example. We also did a myth busting question, which I've neglected to put on here, which was around screens. People often say things like make your screens black, make your UI black, and it will significantly reduce the electricity usage and therefore the energy consumption. Actually, on most modern LCDs, unless you have moved to OLEDs, actually using black actually increases the energy consumption of your website, which a lot of people don't tend to realize, and that might already have been covered in the green design session. I think this has been emphasized in some research recently that was released by Accenture, but the most energy efficient or the energy intensive part of training an ML model is actually in the tuning generally and getting that last few percentage points of accuracy and not in the initial training. Although obviously we don't want to be retraining a model from scratch every time either if we can help it. So looking at the use of transfer learning and picking off the shelf models that we might be able to customize. Who are responsible for carbon in the software? That is the cloud consumer. The cloud provider is also responsible, but they've generally taken significant actions to optimize the carbon of their servers through tools and projects like Open Compute, where Facebook, Microsoft, and others are contributing designs for carbon efficient data centers. So it's actually on us as consumers to make sure that we are reducing the carbon of the software that we deploy to the cloud. And finally, the largest carbon usage in computing tends to be in the hardware, the embodied carbon, rather than the software. But again, it all depends on how you use it. So I have 5 seconds left. I'm going to wrap up there. I didn't like this. Any questions? Okay. I am going to choose to believe that no one wants to be as nasty on the questions as I am being to everyone else. That said, we're going to move over to Martin. Martin, do you want to talk about estimating the carbon footprint of a company's IT infrastructure?
That is what I wanted to talk about. So over the course of my allotted 3 minutes, I wanted to cover what we're doing at the moment at Accenture inside the sustainable and tech team. One of the type of missions we're running is has as aim to cover all of an IT's infrastructure to kind of give an idea of what the carbon footprint of the whole of IT infrastructure is. So that covers end user devices, that covers cloud, of course. And to do so, we're using a tool developed internally called SITA, Sustainable IT Advisor. And basically, how does it go? The SITA tool, well, we need to gather the data first. We use a bottom-up approach for that. So to take the example of cloud providers, when we have a client working with has a lot of infrastructure as a service, well, we'll go down to the VM level, right? We'll ask our client for that kind of granularity. If he's not capable of providing it, of course, we'll take something else, but we are capable of that kind of granularity today. Once we have that data, well, all that data is crunched by the tool, by the CETA tool itself, and it gives an overview of the carbon footprint of the organization. And once that's done, because measuring isn't enough, the tool also provides levers, provides a roadmap to actually get better. So why am I talking about this with my 3 minutes? Well, it's a first step. This tool is a first step for an organization in understanding what's really at work, what's actually behind the scenes. And in my opinion, there's actually no better way to engage a company into something like that. There's no better way to engage a company into going into how do I better my software, going into, well, how do I push my cloud providers to get better? At Accenture, we have other tools. Talisha was talking about EcoSona. We also have PGQ, Project Green Quotient. And these are tools that are often pushed throughout a first implementation of CETA. So in a nutshell, what I want you to remember from this is an overall view of an organization's infrastructure's footprint is a sure way to engage them into the next steps. It's a sure way to get them to better their carbon footprint, be it for software or for hardware.
Thank you very much. With 4 seconds to go, you did well. My first question was, how do you find the levels in CETA? And any other questions in the audience, please feel free to.
I'm sorry, how do you define the levels?
Yes, so you mentioned that the software identifies different levels. How do you define what goes into each level? What do they tend to refer to?
In terms of granularity, so basically the idea is, well, it's really what the client is capable of handing over. So I took the cloud provider instance. We don't go up to Dockers in terms of granularity, but if you're capable of providing VM levels, so say you run your software, you run your ML project on an X2 large on AWS, well, that's what we'll be asking. If you're not capable of providing that kind of detail, we'll ask for the type of servers, or if you're not capable of providing that, well, we'll ask for a cloud spend. So it's really in terms of how granular the client can go that we use those different levels.
Okay, great. I should have joined the dots between Sustainability Advisor and CETA. Are there any other questions in the chat? You've got 1 minute to go.
I take it doesn't take into account personal computers or laptops and things like that?
It does. I chose not to focus on that because here we're not really talking about end user devices, but the idea is to have a global overview. So we take into account end user devices, be it laptops, smartphones, tablets. We also try to take into account networks. So of course, there's a lot more uncertainty when it comes to networks, but that is the idea. So devices when we can, and global networks with the 1 byte model generally. I don't know if you've heard of it, developed by the Shift project.
I have, but yeah, I haven't looked into it. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it sounds very cool. Right, thank you very much, Martin. All these talks make me think I wish I could give people more time. Right, the next person up is Alessandro. Alessandro, over to you. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Chris. I would link my speech to what Martin said right now. Basically, he presented the powerful of the CETA tool from a theoretical perspective, but we used this type of tool for a real project that we delivered for a global automotive client. So I will show to you a couple of slides on this point, and then let you make some questions on the exercise that we did for the client. As Martin explained, the CETA tool has been used to analyze different categories of devices. In particular, we focused on end-user devices, servers, data center, and also some network devices. We analyzed them from a life cycle assessment standpoint. So we explained to the client that the devices has different emission profiles according to their nature. So more relevant to the embodied emission for example, end-user device like laptops or mobile phone, and more on the usage part for the servers. We explained it to the client which are the main emission in scope 2 and 3, since we are talking about IT and they do not have their own data center. Scope 1 is not so relevant. So we explained to them the difference between scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, and we mixed this data with the grid emission factor. So different emissions, usage emissions, according to the country where the device is used. We need to take in consideration that the client has a global footprint, so the grid emission factor has a real important relevance. We analyzed around 500,000 devices, so a very huge list of devices from different sources. And then we were able to calculate the scope 2 and scope 3 emissions divided for the different categories, and also, that is really important for them, from a business unit and country level perspective. We didn't stop at this level. This is the first point, understand where they are, but we moved also to provide to them some indication. As Martin was saying, the CETA tool is also used to provide to the client some levers to reduce its carbon footprint in IT. So we provided to them some information, some levers, also against the effort to implement them. There isn't a silver bullet to reduce the overall emissions for about 50%. It is a lot of different levels.
Sorry, Alessandro.
Please.
I'm going to start your Q&A time, but feel free to keep going.
Sure, for sure.
You can keep talking as well while people think of questions, sorry, because that was quite interesting.
Okay. No, I was just completing my my speech saying that there isn't a silver bullet for all the situation, but different steps that can be implemented and can reduce significantly, the IT emission, the IT carbon footprint emission.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions at all from the chat?
I guess I have just a comment. It was quite surprising to see this displays being such a high percentage. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Sorry, I didn't get said.
The displays or the monitors were like a very high percentage of the carbon cost, which I would definitely not have guessed.
All of them have been analyzed from an AI standpoint perspective. For some of them, we analyzed them in details. So we got from the client the information about the vendor and the usage profile. For other ones, we based our analysis on the benchmark on the market. But we fully analyzed all the devices of specific categories, servers in particular, desktop and laptops.
That was very interesting. Are there any other questions? No. In which case, thank you very much for your time, Alessandro. That was really interesting. And to all the other speakers so far and left to go, if anyone wants to share their slides, please do, and we can upload them to the website along with these recordings. Next, we have Anna. Anna, who will be talking about green coding, measuring an application's energy profile with open source tools. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you can see me. I would also like to share some slides now and also possibly later if I send them to Chris. So you should be seeing open source toolchain now at the moment. Is this correct? Everybody?
Yep, I can see
Okay.
that.
Cool. All right. So what I will present you today is what we do at Green Coding Berlin, which is hopefully relevant to everybody who's in the green software space and likes open source tools. So I will present how we measure an application's energy profile with our tools and how we see them to be used in the future. So 3 angles of our work regarding this tool. So we create this open source toolchain, which is able to measure the CO2 in your application, but we focus mostly on the stack. So if you have distributed like Kubernetes architecture, or you're on OpenStack, or you have containerized, we are looking into measuring that. At the moment, we are on a containerized stage and are going into Kubernetes. This is the current state. And also we've talked about like on cloud, you can often not measure energy directly. Like if you can use Intel registers sometimes, in the cloud is not possible. So we try to create mathematical models to make this better. And for instance, like ThoughtWorks has with its cloud carbon footprint. And all the measurements we create, we are pushing into an open data repository where data science people can then do measurements on the software. And I will talk about this a bit later in the slides. So to give you some impression of the tool, this is how it currently looks like, what you're getting in terms of a dashboard. So when our test runs, this is a very simple application, 2 containers. You basically have an energy load that is on the system, you have the CPU load, and you get a very easily CEO, CTO ready report from the architecture that you have. You can also with infrastructure as code. So on the left side, you see you typically have a setup and you have a flow. So what runs against the application. And on the right side, you see an example where, for instance, you have a client server-side architecture. So this is a Puppeteer container, so a Chrome browser, and this is a WordPress container, and you're basically accessing it like a normal user would do, and then you see what is happening on the user side, and you see what is happening on the client side. Because we orchestrated on a machine that can measure the power, you also get the power readings, and so the CO2 readings of the whole flow of the architecture. This is a simple example where you can see how our open API interface with Python. So you can compare 2 runs. This is what I did here in this example. So before and after, basically. And yeah, so this you can read in the slides when you see them online. So the one point that I'd like to highlight is that we not only do any measurements on the node directly, but we also measure it in comparison with the DC and AC measurement directly at the wall plug. So we have a lab and we make mathematical models. So if you run them on your server architecture, you can pre-calculate, you get pre-calculated models in order to do so. The last slide that I want to highlight is this, what we like to do with the open data approach. So once we have measured multiple applications, and we hope that the open source community contributes to this one, you can then at some point answer questions like, is Microsoft Word better than OpenOffice? Or is Laravel better than Rails, etc., etc., etc. So it's for enterprise architectures, but it will also be boiling down to on a library on a code level later on. So, and I see that my 3 minutes are up. And
it is,
this is the last slide where you
much.
can connect with me later on or follow what we're doing.
Thank you very much. I'll hold off my geeky open source questions. Anyone else in the chat, please feel free to ask. I had a question in, where does your data come from for the underlying hardware efficiency? Do you have that from the cloud providers, or is that self-calculated?
I don't know exactly what you mean by hardware efficiency, but let me give you an answer for energy, and then we can iterate on that. So the energy you get directly out of the processor. So our testing machines access a register inside of the processor that gives you the energy of what is going on. Depending on your hardware, this can also happen for the GPU and for the RAM. And for the hard disk, you have to make an assumption. But these are negligible values, so they are an estimation. But in our lab, we can measure it, but we don't have values for every hard disk out there. So we make a calibrated approach and then make these values also for the hard disk.
Okay, so it's estimated, but the energy usage itself isn't from, say, the manufacturer or the actual vendor. It's something that you estimate in your lab.
Only the hard disk is estimated. The rest is directly measured because
it
comes out of the processor registers.
Okay, awesome. Are there any other questions from the chat?
Just a comment. Please do share these slides with Chris, because I'd love to have click through some of your demos and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, same. Really, really interesting. Thank you very much for speaking. It's nice to see so many different groups in one place, because there's so many tools and and patterns and practices, and it seems like we're all doing slightly different things, which is good. Many different ways of tackling the same problem. Next, over to Fergus.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. I don't have any slides to share, but I'm going to share my screen just to talk about kind of resource-aware ecosystems and then technology that is aware of its carbon intensity. So there's a number of projects going on at the Green Software Foundation, and I would encourage you to have a look and get involved. Those include things like the Carbon Aware SDK. So that's about actively moving resources from different regions, actively scheduling compute resources in the cloud. So specifically cloud compute to reduce the software carbon intensity of that. We've also got the carbon intensity for continuous integration and continuous deployment. So actually taking the ideas and the calculations of software carbon intensity and putting that into your development pipeline and process. Because there's that phrase that we use in English quite a lot, which is what you don't know won't hurt you. But in this case, it's completely untrue. What we don't know about our software and where our software is and what hardware it's running on and what times it's running at is actually doing a lot of damage in terms of the carbon intensity that it's responsible for. So for me, kind of step one is having those tools we've just heard about, having additional tools. I'll explain the one on the screen to be able to actually assess the damage that we're doing. It's similar to saying if I'm going to jump in my car and go to the grocery store, if I knew exactly how much carbon I was going to emit every single time I did that, if my car told me, I would probably make changes about the way I was going to drive. Whereas quite often we only look back and you say, okay, I've done X amount of miles and I know what type of car I have. So therefore, I've released this much carbon. It's always looking backwards. So for me, like a real interest around this is to actually use the live data, to use the historical data, and I'll talk very briefly about what's on screen, to actually make predictions and be able to move some of our resources and make smarter decisions, because the more information that we have, the better choices that we can make. What I've got up on screen is a tool you may have seen before. It's Electricity Map. This is just how we get some of the live data in. So different people may use different tools. So you can see right now, France is at 87 grams of carbon intensity. We've got some of the Nordic countries doing really amazingly. That's because they have very high levels of hydro. Countries like I'm in the UK, we're using a lot of gas right now. So different, you can actually see live where resources are using different carbon intensities. And then if we know what technology stacks we have deployed in that, then we can start making decisions about, okay, maybe I should move my, maybe I should move all my tech stack to Norway. So so I can have a greener impact for my software, depending on how that scales, and like make sensible decisions because we actually have the data and we know that. So that's what we're working towards. So I believe that's time. I'll stop, but if you have any questions, please feel free.
Yeah, any questions for Fergus?
Otherwise, I'll just say
we just see Europe. I mean, will you be extended it to global or?
Yeah, absolutely. This tool is this tool gives us data from all around the world. It gives us to us dependent on different energy regions. So like I'd encourage you to come to electricitymap.org and see your different regions. You can see some geographies have quite complicated power networks like the USA, whereas in Europe we tend to be just nationalized. So each country has their own power network. It's a little bit easier to get your head around, whereas I'm not sure exactly how they decided how to do that in the US, especially Florida. I'm not. Yeah, so otherwise I'll just use my time to do a plug to please check us out on the Green Software Foundation. There's a number of projects going on that are using this sort of data to move some of the resources around and make predictions. So, if you've got the time and the interest, please do get involved.
Any other questions for Fergus? Otherwise, I'll say thank you very much. Thanks, Fergus. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Right. So the final session hacked my really strict timekeeping. So we have 3 people, one after the other, in one session, talking about how to write green code. So I'll give you 9 minutes. Feel free to get started at will.
Thanks, Chris. Let's get the slides up.
Well, so hi everyone. I'm Jo and I'm here with Alex and Gita, and we're going to talk you through our Green Coding Hackathon that we participated in over the last couple of months. So the hackathon, we really wanted to focus on how we made our coding greener, and sort of what tools could help impact that and basically measure things going forward. So to begin with, we had multiple participants, and these were resources from apprentices all the way up to Accenture leadership. And we were split into 9 different teams, all named after different planets. And we all participated in this sort of outside of our project work. So we all, so there was no costs incurred by doing this hackathon. So to get us started, we first had to identify some green testing tools. We all presented these back, and these included things such as Code Carbon and various NPM packages for JavaScript libraries. Following this, we had a few options that we could write different coding sets for, and then we had to run these against our tools to see if we could make any of this code greener. To wrap that up, we all wrote a playbook each, which then had different things that we'd learned, and then this has since been sort of collaborated together with the various different methods that would improve our coding to make it more green along the way. Over to Alex.
Thanks, Jo. So yeah, as a result of our sort of findings, there were several teams in the end, I think 5 or 6. There was quite a lot of overlap with what we all kind of found going through it and kind of improving our code, and just kind of research, just looking around kind of online and finding things from there. Main kind of things that we kind of approached on were the kind of the choice of algorithms and kind of your design choices more than anything impact the end result. So for instance, and that kind of ties into all the other kind of parts, like not using unnecessary variables, and kind of reducing the kind of limited or like non-functional operations, and just kind of making it as clean as possible, so that it's more efficient and therefore more sustainable. So yeah, those are the sort of kind of implementation and design choices with code. But then we also kind of came across a sort of other aspect of it with the kind of the delivery of code, or like, you know, how it's kind of, you know, sent down a pipeline or whatever. You know, if it's compressed, it's going to be quicker to kind of push through. And if you've got web pages that are compressed, they're going to load quicker when, you know, people visit them, etc. So that sort of thing, again, ties in with efficiency, but it's also really good for sustainability too. And then finally, kind of libraries was a bit of a sort of sticky subject. There were some groups decided that libraries were pretty beneficial because, you know, it's kind of offloading the kind of effort to implement something efficiently to, you know, a library, and then for importing it and using it as little of it as possible is quite useful. But then also on the other hand, it's sort of like using lots of libraries and large chunks of libraries and using them in your code is also kind of a bit wasteful. It's probably better off to use kind of either smaller packages or just take what you need from them and sort of forget the rest, sort of thing. But that's the sort of general findings from all the kind of teams that we had. So it's really interesting to see everyone approach it slightly differently, and there was a lot of specifics to do with languages. So some Python specific, some more like JavaScript or Java centered, but it all kind of relating to these kind of 5 key principles. And sort of just reiterating the point about algorithms, Gita's going to kind of go through like a worked example that we kind of demonstrated.
Thanks, Alex. So here is an example of how we converted a algorithm from using more energy to a efficient one. So as you see, like there is a bubble sort algorithm on the left side, and you have a quick sort algorithm. The bubble sort is using nested loops, whereas the quick sort algorithm is using the partitioning and recursing. So if you can see, like always nested loops results in taking up more energy. So it's better way to come up with the efficient algorithm. So while choosing the algorithm, it has to match both the use case as well as it is efficient as well. Can you go to the next slide, please, Alex?
Sure.
So we had 3 main key learnings from the Green Code Hackathon. So we could see like there is passion and interest to shape the sustainability practices, and that helped us to go further ahead. And then kind of like we have a future plans to extend that activities that we have learned from this Green Code Hackathon. And the second part is that we all always assume that sustainability has to start with the coding, but it is not so. It starts with the code design process, because that is where like you decide whether to go for what approach and how you are going to achieve it. So it's always better to use a correct code design, and then accordingly you can proceed further. And the last and final step, each one, when we consider like if you make a small change, that might end up in a big energy savings, because like if I switch off a light, you can assume like millions of houses turn off a light, extra light, that might actually reduce the energy consumed by that location. So that way, like even a small change matters. So that is what the main key learnings of it. Can you go to the next slide, please? And I just want to highlight what are our future plans. Like we are planning to create a community and get along the same minded people, and make sure like we are able to bring out a template or a tool, or kind of like a guide for them, so that they can follow like a kind of like a framework where they can follow a standard number of standards practices that will help them to reduce the energy consumed by the software. And also like you can implement that for a different kind of like a perspective. And also there is a plan to do a hackathon on different areas like DevOps and cloud, so that we can find out more energy efficient ways, and then we can use that. And the final thing was like bringing up a certification for people who are who show enthusiasm in sustainability, so that like we can give some certificate and then train them with that with the practices that we can follow. So that is what the future plan for us. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Thank you. If there was any questions, just let us know.
Yeah, the three of you did really well actually, with 1 minute left, and across three of you, really interesting talk. Thank you for sharing. Are there any questions in the chat at all?
Maybe a question on my side, Carol speaking. During the hackathon, did you also investigate, leverage at the design phase? I mean, even functional design phase, or you were focusing on the development part?
Actually, first this hackathon happened in 3 phases. So the first phase was to find out a tool. Where we found out a tool, based on the tool, we will be measuring the code, whatever we have developed. So the second phase, what we did was like we developed the code based on like first we measured the code just using the tool, and then we found out what are the efficient way, like since we were given 3 exercises to do, and based on that we came up with like how we can change the even though the requirement is the same, how we can approach it based on the design perspective, like just by using it straightforward, or can we move certain things from how to say, like from coding perspective, rather than just choosing the algorithm which I want to achieve. So that is how we trained that.
Yeah, if I can just follow on from that. So one of the tasks that we got asked to look at was sort of chipping into an API that was already created, and how we could sort of make a program that uses a good user experience, but also the ability of making that as efficient as possible. As an example, on the team that I was on, we looked at how we could implement like a caching solution that would therefore reduce the number of API calls, in turn reducing the amount of energy that was being used across the internet. For more of a overarching design side, we haven't implemented that at this point in this hackathon, but we do have a plan to sort of have a DevOps hackathon and more of a design-based hackathon to follow on from this, so we can get different communities involved as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any other questions at all? If not, I'd like to thank the final group there, and thank everyone that's attended throughout the day. And Carol and I will wrap up this summit. Let me just get those slides back up. Okay, so you've had myself and Carol as hosts for the day, as well as Eric and Fergus in the tech tracks. We've had a ton of different speakers. Now I know, Carol, you had some thoughts around what we've discussed over the day and what we've heard.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Chris, because first of all, you have been a great coordinator for the full sessions, and the work you have done is amazing, assembling this diversity of speakers, of participants, of facilitators, and so on. So thank you so much. I'm very grateful to the work you've done, Chris. That was amazing. The first thing that I keep in mind is that there is so much passion, energy, commitment from leaders. We've seen from the beginning, from the very start with Anna, who is leading Avanade at European level, some really commitment, very, very strong commitments. It was the same with the panel session I hosted with Margaret Ann from Microsoft, with Florian from Agoria in Belgium, with Emmanuel from Airbus. So there is on the kind of the leadership side some commitment, but what I can find joyful and this is I'm full of hope after this session, because it's not only about leaders, it's not only about developers or designers, or there is a spectrum, and we have each of us our role to play in this transformation, in sustainability transformation. In IT, bringing sustainability within IT, in technology, but also enabling technology to become a real enabler of the sustainability transformation. And so that's Margaret Ann who said, small changes lead to significant changes. So I think, yeah, the small changes that all of us are doing are meaningful and will make a significant impact in the long run, for sure. Then what I keep in mind as well and take out of this session is that there are already some good experiments, meaning, and this is increasing with the Green Software Foundation, there are some awareness sessions, there are some experience of, embarked teams with the climate risk, with the sustainability quotient, with Microsoft was mentioning some 30 minutes high-level e-learning. Green Software Foundation is also producing a lot of materials. So there are some materials out there. Next level is the training to develop the skills. Some elements are considered pretty mature, and Emmanuel Laroche, who is also the leader of Sustainable IT Institute in France, from the communication side, he mentioned that for web development, there is already a good level of maturity. Now we have to deploy that at scale, first of all. And second, we have to make it systematic, whatever the type of technology and the type of digital service, including for the enterprise type of systems, and leveraging all the activating all the leverage from infrastructure to the whole green software development lifecycle. And then last but not least, I think some of us might have the tendency to focus on only limiting the negative impact. And that's why I was asking the question about the functional design is, we should keep in mind that if I am working for Airbus, for an automotive industry, if I am working for a bank, yes, IT has a footprint and we should reduce it, but it's the whole of the IT team, it's the whole of our digital team to serve the business. And when the business has to change its business model, its processes for the sustainability transformation, we have the responsibility to propose ideas, to innovate towards, the sustainability transformation in the business. So starting with the requirements for sure, but really the functional design, kind of bringing ideas. Do you really need that functionality? Because for the user experience, maybe sometimes less is more. And, what data do you need? Because, we know great decisions are driven by great data and visible data on what's the potential impact. So yes, so that's, great stories, great examples. We have to scale and we have to keep in mind both to act as an ecosystem towards sustainability in technology and sustainability by technology.
Yeah, those are all great points. There's nothing there that I would disagree with. And I think the talks today the lightning talks, first of all, really surprised me actually with how many different things are going on. Lots of things actually to follow up on, to find out about and to connect with, which I actually found really positive. And I think even seeing Fernando's talk on design, which I sadly missed, but I plan to go back and watch the recording of, it made me think about the difference between the also bottom-up IT approach, which I think is what you were leading with the business model, but also that kind of chasm between the top-down C-suite leadership, lines of business leaders who are thinking about sustainability, the development teams for who it's now becoming a strong priority. Almost, where's that bit in the middle? The people stuck in the day job, stuck in doing what they're doing day to day, and aren't maybe thinking innovation-led or opportunities to contribute to sustainability. They've just focused on continuing to do what they've always been tasked to do, and they may not realize why it's now a really strong imperative. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone that participated today. We've got a lot of lightning talks there. We've had a lot of people listening in. I saw 5 great outputs from the workshops, one of the business track, 4 in the tech track. Lots of those will become incredible open source projects, hopefully. Some of them will be incredible inner source projects within the organizations in which we work. Hopefully we'll share and solve many different problems. So from an Avanade perspective, as the co-host, I'd like to point people to the green software page. Carol, is there anything you want to point people to at all?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. At Accenture, we also have some sustainability technology page, green software page, and we've just published a report on uniting technology and sustainability. So yeah, interesting point. I think with more than 500 large companies involved in the survey, and also some recommendations. So would be a potential good element for all of you.
Yeah, and as we now wrap up, first of all, I should emphasize this was not just me. There's Carol, Lee, Emily Thomas, and a ton of people behind the scenes. So thank you very much. Carol's being overly modest there. And finally, this is not the last session. I know a ton of you have been involved. The closing ceremony is on the 17th at 5 a.m. Europe time, 5 o'clock Europe in the afternoon Europe time. It's all on summit.greensoftware.foundation. It brings together speakers from many of the different events around the world. I'm in London. Obviously, everyone else here is from all around the globe, from Berlin to Paris. But we also have events that have gone in Japan, in Australia, in North America, from Brazil. And those speakers have recorded some of their best sections and messages on there. So I really do recommend that you catch that if you haven't already signed up. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I just want to emphasize thank you very much to everyone that attended.